I'd like to welcome Congressman Frank MrVan.
Hello. I'm going to go, I have a very strong carryover voice. I'm going to go without the microphone behind the podium. First, I want to thank him and the leadership organization, and Nick hit the nail on the head, for having the courage to lead and to step forward about the beliefs and values that we have, not just today, but tomorrow and in the future. And I thought it was important to do a little bit of research on how Indivisible started, the organization itself. Indivisible started in 2016 by some staffers of members of Congress because it was obviously the beginning of a new era. It followed the success of the Tea Party. And so there were individuals who had democratic values that saw that organizing in a community and mobilizing and making sure that you learn how to use the political process as an electoral force to achieve a goal was the blueprint that they put forward on the internet. And that took off. And then that took off into advocacy during the first Trump administration, where individuals came together and they stood for certain priorities. Individually, they were own silos, but they focused on democracy, they focused on women's rights, they focused on human rights and transparency, which is very similar to where we are today. And it also, it became an electoral force, but it also became a force within social media. And so I'm going to talk about a lot of different issues, but I wanted to bring that up because I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have the skill set through this organization to be able to organize and to turn your frustration into your community, your block, your family, to make sure they vote. And how important or vital this election is going to be for the first step, which is going to be a checks and balances system where the House is able to take over the majority. So as your member of Congress, I'm going to flip forward very quickly. I'm on appropriations. I'm on two subcommittees, which is energy and water, and also commerce, justice, and science. I've used that position to be able, in subcommittee hearings, to hold people accountable. For example, in the very beginning, the department, why I wanted to be on energy was because I wanted to be on that committee because we had a hydrogen hub that had the value of our community of 16,000 construction jobs, longevity for cleaner air and cleaner water for us, a carbon capture component which would have been housed in Illinois, also with additional 1,000 jobs to BP Amoco, and allowed our steel mills to make cleaner steel and be more globally competitive. So we fought for that. There were only 7 in the country. We were able to sustain that. We were able to get it under the Biden administration, and in the big beautiful bill, because it was new energy, they cut the tax credits from that, and that project is on hold or is canceled. And so I wanted to be in front of the Energy Secretary to hold his feet to the water or to the fire to be able to give us reasonable commitments that he was going to continue. And of course, after he committed to working with me, they had pulled the tax credits, which is a lot of what they have done. And I'll give more examples of how it's just not transparency of things they have clawed back that we have fought for. They have side-doored things very often through the big beautiful bill. And so creating jobs and creating wealth is one of my driving forces. And also when it comes to energy, your energy bills have, in Northwest Indiana, they have spiked, skyrocketed, have gone up 20-30%, which is unmanageable over a duration of time. I want to make sure that we have alternative energy sources such as solar and wind. Now, one of the reasons why solar and wind is the tax credits no longer exist is because, in essence, big oil won the lobbying gamble, and Trump and big oil and big energy are all together. They're big donors. So when that happens, and there is going to be, which I'll talk about, the state issues that are going on within Indiana that contribute to that, but as a national level, looking at it from 30,000 feet, I believe the more energy choices you have within the market, the more options you have to be able to bring down costs. And you have to be able to move forward with a diversified or a plethora of opportunities so that markets can grow and we can have more supply than we have demand when it comes to energy. Then I think it's important to talk about, obviously, the CR and the shutting down the government. We only have so much time, and I'm going to take questions. I voted against the continuing resolution because there are certain things that I believe in, and primarily it's access to health care. The Affordable Care Act, again, because it is something that was a target of the current administration because they've tried to eliminate the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare on 8 or 9 different occasions, but now they finally found a back way to do that. They're basically eliminating the tax credits for the Affordable Care Act. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a single mom, if you're someone who's participating in the public process of the Affordable Care Act, your rates are going to go up 20–30%. Because of the uncertainty they have caused with the Medicare and Medicaid, hospitals and access to health care are going to affect all of us. So the ecosystem of all this, if you cut Medicare and Medicaid in the state, and the governor has also cut Medicaid, so it's a perfect storm in Indiana, ultimately what you're going to have is more people going to the emergency room. You're going to have hospitals receiving less of the pie. They are going to lay people off because they can't employ people, and that's the first thing that's going to go on, so you'll have less access to care. And ultimately, what you're going to do is you're going to have to wait longer, you're going to have less care, and it is going to be a health crisis, along with mental health. You also affect children with not only medical conditions that are on Medicare or Medicaid. Most children who have a disability who are in school have to wait between 4 and 7 years to be able to get their state Medicaid waiver. And if you reduce the funding in Indiana of Medicare and Medicaid, we're a trigger state, 1 of 7 trigger states. So ultimately, they have the authority, or they can bring back or claw back all of that money, and it will reduce health care and it will reduce options for individuals that have autism, who are in school, that have safety nets in order for them to get through that process, to graduate, to function, and to be able to thrive. And so there are healthcare risks that are the drawing board. Other than that, there is SNAP, which is food for women and children, which is we're fighting for, and ultimately the power of the purse. We are fighting for the recognition to make sure that we're able to stand up and negotiate on what we believe in. They are in the majority. They hold the majority, right? So when they're saying we're going to close down government and fire employees, more than likely that's what their plan is to begin with. So then conventional wisdom is, well, you have the majority in the House, you passed it, the CR is in the Senate. And the CR philosophy always is, well, we need 60 votes, so you have to negotiate. So he's made his stance, we're not negotiating with you, 0. We're going to fire everybody, we're going to close down government, it's going to be your fault. Well, they're in the majority. When they want to advance their judges or advance their cabinet members, they choose the nuclear option that bypasses the 60-vote margin, and they do it with a 50 or 51-vote margin where the vice president can break that tie. That is an option for them. So they are trying to fulfill their Project 2025, and it centralizes power even more if that happens. And so it is still a hypothetical. We are going back on Monday. I'm doing everything in my power to get up to speed on where we are with negotiations. It's extremely fluid, and that's where we are. What they are going to do in the playbook is they're going to threaten to make sure that VAs are going to be the first place that they fire people, so the veteran medical care aren't going to happen, and other significant pieces of information or significant federal agencies that affect our everyday life. And they are going to play hardball, and we are going to have to do that also, because I believe that this is something that, of course I don't want the government to shut down, but this is a point that we have faced before. We have to evolve and understand that the only language they understand is toughness. It's going to be a great deal of information, misinformation coming through the next couple of days. And more importantly, on who gets blamed, it's what we're fighting for. And as I mentioned, I'm on appropriations. We set appropriations in a bipartisan way. And for 2026, we did, 2 weeks ago, we were in session 17, 14, 13 hours every day to make sure that we had those bills. And the argument the Democrats had, and the Republicans agreed silently in committee, is we go through this process, we prioritize, we work in a bipartisan way to come up with a solution. Then you, in essence, bend the knee to the administration, give a CR, and allow them the authority for the spends. It allows them the authority to do what they want. And so I believe that we are going to be able to find a solution that hopefully keeps government open, and that we move towards beginning to negotiate when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to the things that they are taking away and clawing back. Another big, and I might as well talk about it because someone's going to ask me. Brett's going to be like, why don't you just wait to let them ask because you don't know what they're going to ask. But the fact of the matter is, in a reality, right, just a gut check time. Literally my first day, my first 5 hours was January 6th. So I had a White River rafting trip along the legislative process. You know, Wicker Park, come golf. Can we help you out with your food, your utilities? Big difference. But what I will share with you, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, the most challenging time I have had, or the most eerie of feelings that I have had, was after the Charlie Kirk assassination. And I want to explain it to you in the process of how it went down. And I want to explain fully my vote, because that's something you should ask me. So, one, full disclosure, I had no idea of the reach and the magnitude of the popularity of that individual. Wholeheartedly, very honestly. So secondly, after I had heard news, we had a vote. I walked to the floor, everyone was very somber. And let me be perfectly clear, whatever you may or may not see on social media, the Speaker of the House, who only takes control under special circumstances, brought us all to attention, took control of the chair, and then said, we are going to do a moment of silence. We all respectfully did that moment of silence. That moment of silence ended, and then someone from the majority yelled out, we want to say an out loud prayer, and kept demanding to do an out loud prayer, which has never been done on the House floor. So then that stirred emotions, and then someone screamed out, you're a murderer, and then there were reactions, and that's what everyone saw. That's what everyone saw on social media, like that chaos is what was going on. And then once that settled down, after about a minute and 45 seconds, everyone went back to work. But there was a palatable kind of eerie feeling about not only what had happened, but for, humbly, the safety of ourselves. Because they gave us a security warning at that time, they really didn't know what was transpiring and who was at risk and who wasn't. So the behavior of pointing fingers and blaming individuals and the information that I had at that time was an eerie feeling. Now fast forward, and I'm not trying to be cute, but I've thought about this a long time because there's two examples of it. The name of the organization is Indivisible, meaning can't be divided, right? So literally what a majority does in some instances, it creates messaging bills that is designed to divide. Two examples that I'm going to give. One was an anti-Semitic piece of legislation that condemned a brutal attack in Colorado, the first half. The second half thanked law enforcement. A third thanked ICE. So you had a choice on a resolution, right? So just listen. You had a choice to condemn an act of violence, for basically a hate crime, thank law enforcement, but that one part of that resolution. So hold it there, put a pin in that. So that is designed for, if you vote against it, you're against hate crimes. If you vote for it, you're for ICE. And that's exactly what happened. So fast forward to happen just last week. Charlie Kirk, they come out with it's basically they package it as a end political violence. So the last half of it is there is violence on both sides. They reference Minnesota killings of the two state legislators, how we have to live as one nation, how we have to end violence. And the first half of it was, for lack of a better term, praising Charlie Kirk, his movement, and what he has done for our country. So how you vote on that, if you vote against it, and let me break down how the caucus went, so you can have an inside perspective. The caucus met before that resolution because everyone felt the weight of that palatable moment. Everyone was able to see that this resonated across the country, and it was a pivotal time, less than 5-6 days ago. And the leader, Jeffries, made the choice that he didn't tell us what to do, and he said he was going to vote for it because it is time to tamper down political violence. And regardless of what pushed back, and regardless of the message and the hatred that was behind that individual, he felt it was his decision to make sure he voted for it. Sarah McBride, who is a trans member, came up and talked about how she felt her entire community is at risk.
Yes.
She gave a 15-minute speech on how she was going to rise above any type of hate speech and vote for this, regardless of her community and what they felt, some, because again, it was time to take a step forward to make sure we end political violence. The Congressional Black Caucus felt that they know a lot about political violence and civil rights, and their leader was shot and killed. They felt that they chose not to vote for it because of their beliefs and what his message was, and that was their choice. I immediately talked to two pastors. One pastor told me that because of violence, it was Bishop Grant, who he said I can use his name, told me that in his congregation it would be best to end violence politically in our nation. Another member of the Pastoral Alliance kind of went both ways and said it's up to you. So I chose, after a long thought process, to vote for that. And so I go through that whole educational process because I feel it when you feel it that you think that I'm not on your side. Of course I am not, because how my words and my deeds, I don't express hatred, I don't flame the passions of the day, I fight vigorously for what I believe in, but I find no value in that. And so those bills are designed to divide us, to split common sense, and to put people who, or myself, who's in the most vulnerable district in the country, in very difficult spots. Because if you're suppressed, and if you don't believe that I am working on your behalf, that's to their advantage. Because when I talk about your electoral power, that's you going door to door, that's you making a call, that's you showing up today, that's you going on social media and saying, please vote for this person and this is why. That has an impact. And so there's an industry that by design tries to divide us in resolutions like that. It's not even law. So I felt compelled to be able to share all that with you. I think that it's important that you understand fighting for healthcare. The other, because the flood the zone approach towards things, two things that are really weighing on me. The first one is with the big beautiful bill, and I usually call it the reconciliation bill, but just for definitional point, what they did in many instances is they defunded Planned Parenthood on the back end, which in essence is taking away women's reproductive rights even more than what they have on a state level, but on a national level. And because of everything that's going on, that's kind of being lost in the surface of what they are doing to our communities and to women, and to women's health care. You know, those are things that we stand up for and we fight for. As I've consistently said, I have two daughters, I believe in it, it is a healthcare crisis, and I will continue to fight for the funding and the right for that. The teachers who are here, Natalie, and your first name? Shane. You guys are intimidating me like I'm in first grade. Natalie Snake's sitting there with her arms crossed. I've known her since I was 14. Here's the bottom line. So I'm switching gears, and I respectfully to Earl Harris, I'm staying in my lane always. But in our state and our country, I believe you have, as Kim talked about, Jimmy Kimmel, right? On TV, an entertainer is judged by what he says. For my sister's a teacher, and so I'm going to go back in history. Since Mr. Bennett, right, and Mitch Daniels, teachers have been under attack.
Yeah.
They have been the enemy.
Right.
It has escalated to the case recently, which is beyond my understanding and how we operate in society, where teachers are being policed and their license can be taken away when they simply state what their beliefs are outside the classroom. Now, I've tried to take that to the next level. If my daughter becomes a teacher and she says, Governor Braun is not a nice guy, or Attorney General Rokita is not a nice guy, can she lose her license? So ultimately, I understand that's out of my lane, but that is something we ought to monitor and end very quickly, and should be a rallying cry for everyone who believes in free speech, more than Jimmy Kimmel, because that is being overshadowed. Let's put that in perspective. A citizen of the state of Indiana is going to get their livelihood taken away if two individuals don't agree with what they're saying. That's absurd, and it's not American. And so, again, staying in my lane, I just want to thank the teachers for what you do and keep it in perspective. Which I should always say, Mrs. Jansich's husband was my government teacher, and next to my father was the most influential person I had in my life. So thank you. Big bear of a guy who had high expectations for everyone, and if you didn't hit his expectations, he would scream at you until you shook your bones and got you in line. And everyone needs that guy, and I had him, and I always appreciate it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. On immigration, because that'll be a question that people will ask, and what's going on in Chicago. I don't get any briefings on what is going on in immigration. I've consistently believed in an immigration policy that is strong on security, humane, and safe. I've always believed that dreamers have to have a path to citizenship. You have to know who's in our country for a national security level, and the country is asking for that. I was a supporter of Senator Langford's bill, who lives in the building that I live in. I talked to him on multiple occasions. It increased border security, it increased technology, it answered the questions on making sure that we sped up cases with more judges in asylum, and ultimately, there are pieces of legislation that I have voted for, that I believe in, that will begin the conversation, but there's a lot of work to be done. So that's the official side. Now, my thought process is, so the immigration policies have been with the administration, and that system has been broken for decades. It really has been broken for decades. So me identifying that, and as a person who's responsible, means nothing. It should mean nothing to all of you. But what I mean by that is, when the system is broken, then the authority sits with the president, and it sways one way, then it sways the other. And so now it is swayed towards enforcement, persecution, and deportation. And it's taking away due process and human rights. Until, as a legislator, we find a bipartisan approach to be able to answer immigration, to be able to have a pathway to citizenship, and to make sure that we do it in a humane way, and we keep our nation secure, you're going to keep having those pendulums. And who it is hurting most is our employers. And I can give you two real examples. Her Farms in Lowell. They have H1A,
H2A.
H2A representatives who come here and work part-time. They're having a difficult time to fulfilling those jobs because people don't want to come here out of fear. The second step is, I was with the cement, Brett's gone. The cement industry. So individuals who pour the concrete, who pour our roads. They're in the construction trades. They are finding it very difficult to find workers who are here legally, who come over from different countries to fulfill those jobs, to be able to fulfill the jobs that they have. So I could talk about the ecosystem of the groceries and the supply and demand, which I think is important. Visited her farms with the Farm Bureau. I've been endorsed by the Farm Bureau 2 times out of 3 elections. And one of the most educational things that I learned is the uncertainty that the tariffs, whatever business I go to, uncertainty is the key word. The inability to forecast, the inability to invest because they don't know what the future holds and what their costs are going to be. And so ultimately, where you are with produce and farms is that local and big farms, their input costs, such as insecticides, fertilizers, and nitrates, have gone up by 40% because of tariffs. And so they pass that 40% on to Bill's Produce, which is local. I'm just giving an example. So Bill's Produce passes that on to Van Til's, who buys it from Bill's Produce, who then passes it on to you. And so when you hear the word tariff, understand that those are it's going to be about a $3,500 tax on all of you going forward. And the reason why they're pushing so hard on tariffs, again, just to talk to the choir, is because they gave tax cuts to billionaires in the most profitable corporations in the most profitable times that they have done in the history. They, in essence, cut Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, and cut jobs to be able to pay for a tax cut that I know for certain for 4 years, the only bell that they rang was the deficit is killing us. The deficit is killing us. They added $4.5 trillion to the deficit for those tax cuts. $4.5 trillion. And so these are things worth identifying and worth fighting for. But I will tell you, in the reconciliation of the big beautiful bill, there are 2 things that I can fight for. And if all of those cuts weren't in there, it would be because this is what they did to the working class. And this is the political hook that they put in legislation so they can act like they're on the side of working class. They gave a tax cut on tips and a tax cut on overtime, which only lasts for 3 years.
Right.
The other tax cuts are indefinite.
Like Bush did.
So if you want to fight for something, and if you want to fight for the working class, and if you want to talk to a policeman or a steel worker or someone who works overtime, then you make those tax cuts permanent. And then you lower the rates on the permanent tax cuts that they had given. And so you cut, and you do the same thing for tax on tips. But it's also a very it's a very small amount of people that can participate or simply are eligible for that tip tax credit. So the other aspect, which I suspect I will be asked about to cut to the chase, would be redistricting. I'll see that one work. I'll break it down in process, right? Big beautiful bill passes, polls come out, and what I will credit the administration on is they can read a poll. And immediately after the numbers start falling, the president calls Governor Abbott in Texas, asks for 5. Governor Abbott bends a knee, gives 5, passes it. California, because they have an independent commission, starts the process to counteract that to get 5 back. People are scrambling around in politics. The first flag that came to me was prior to the ask, President Trump, and this was a press release, President Trump called Governor Braun and offered him $15 million in aid for disaster relief from a tornado. In the world of government, every dollar and penny is important. But to the President of the United States and Governor Braun, $15 million is chump change. So my red flag immediately went up. Because in order to get disaster relief, because as a township trustee, I focused on disaster relief, you have to hit a threshold, literally a threshold of hundreds of millions of dollars of damage in order to have it declared an emergency in order to get relief. So I knew that that was just a conversation that they had to begin the talks about redistricting, and the timing was right. Then a week later, J.D. Vance comes to the State House. He brings in the Speaker of the House and the Senate. They have a conversation. No real movement. No real movement. There's no appetite for it. They don't commit. If they were committed to it, they would have stepped out of that press conference and said, "This is what we're going to do. We believe in this." So there is apprehension. So it's a tough spot for me to either attack or, not poke the bear, all those things that are common sense. But the fact of the matter is that's not enough. Then they called, because there was no reaction, they called the whole state legislature, the Republican caucus, in respect to Earl Harris, to the White House. And then they call, so they have the state legislature 50, I'd say 40 out of the 150 travel, so less than a third. Still no appetite when they walk out. I'll hold back.
Don't hold back.
So.
You're doing good so far. Keep it going.
Right.
Don't stop now.
So they step out. There's still no appetite, and Governor Braun is on a radio show about a week ago. And says, we may doesn't mean shall, we may call it, and basically says, and I'm paraphrasing, but I'm very accurate, either we get on board, and the legislature gets on board, or we're gonna be on the wrong side of the phone, and we're gonna lose funding, and that's gonna put the state of Indiana in a bad spot, financially. Word for word, paraphrasing, that's exactly what he said. And so, still in limbo with that. So what I will tell you in rapid fire is you have a state, where we have teachers here today, you have a state that passed a bill which was called Senate Bill 1. So the uproar that we had about defunding police, they followed through with it. Senate Bill 1 defunds your local and county governments by a great deal, which the majority of their budgets are public safety, police and fire. To our schools, Senate Bill 1 has cut funding to the belief that you have never seen before. Your energy costs are rising because they passed two pieces of legislation, one to reorder coal-firing burn units, two, that the ratepayers pay for investments in research and development for nuclear energy, for small modular reactors, for data centers and AI, and for capacity. So they have defunded your local governments, they have defunded your schools, they have contributed to the skyrocketing energy costs, and they want to call a special session to play politics. Not to fix those things that they have transposed onto you. And what you don't know yet is how your local governments are going to make that up. They are going to increase your local option income tax. So the state shifted that responsibility, the majority, the Republicans and the governor, shifted that funding source onto you to pay double in your local option income tax, to stand in front of you and say, we're saving you $300 in property taxes. And true to form, the businesses in Indiana received the greatest cuts with the greatest benefits because our governor is a business person along with our president. And that is the economics of what's going on. So I'm prepared to, here's my thought process. I have been targeted. They have dropped $20 million against me. I'm in a +1 district. The next election I had, theoretically, the most powerful Republican in the state of Indiana, the chairman of the Republican Party. I've increased my margins. I've stayed connected to my district. And you can put me in Timbuktu, I'm gonna compete, I'm gonna connect, and I'm gonna deliver for those communities. And I'm gonna- The other thing that I always do is, I was on Veteran Affairs, was honored to pass the Honor the Pact Act. To all the veterans who are here, I just want to thank you for your service and all that we I'd be happy to answer any questions and to be able to start the dialogue process. Yes, sir.
Speaking of getting tough, I was wondering what,
I'm sorry. Getting tough, I'm tracking.
speaking of getting tough, I was wondering what you thought in general about what Gavin Newsom is doing and all the things he's doing. Is that something that we could apply, any parts of that we could apply?
Great question. It's not about me, right? That question is not about me, but I'll never be a national figure. But what I will tell you is there's a vacuum of someone who challenges the status quo and that demands attention to what is going on. And it appears not only Gavin Newsom, Brochures out of Kentucky, Shapiro out of Pennsylvania, all those individuals are standing up and allowing the leverage of their jobs to be able to maximize what they believe in. And so, to answer that question directly, I'm so district-centric, and there's so many moving parts, I can't answer that with knowing exactly what he's doing or not doing to be able to give you an expertise. But what I will tell you is he's filling a national void of a voice that there is an appetite for. And he does it intelligently, and I've been in a room with him, and I guess this is inside information. I was in a room with him at a meeting, and I was apprehensive about him and who he was. Command of the issues, charismatic, can stop a room. You'll sit at the edge of your seat at every word that he tells, and his narratives are on target. That's not an endorsement. I'm just telling you I was shocked by the presence that he had and the command of a room that he had and his ability to articulate the needs of what he believes in.
I have a question, Frank, and it just kind of came to me recently. All of the different things flood the zone, everything that's being dumped on us continuously. Have you ever tried to talk to any of the Republicans to get them to switch parties? And I'm serious. I'm serious. Is there, not just you, but the rest of our representation in Congress from the Democratic side, to try to recruit them? Like, how can you possibly go along with, they're going to cut cancer research next month or next year 37%. I mean, this is on top of everything else they're doing. I mean, just things like that. How can they possibly justify going along with that? I mean, that just...
The correct answer is no. I have not. But I have been... I have relationships with individuals who are on the other side. And the example that I'll give is, it's a choice that I made, but I was chairman of the prayer breakfast with President Biden. And during the prayer breakfast, my co-chair was Tracy Mann from Kansas. And I asked all of you to look up Tracy Mann's speech on the floor after the incident that happened last week with the assassination. His message was clear, concise about how important it is for us to use these moments and to go forward, bringing this country together in a bipartisan way. And he was very articulate on how the country is suffering by being torn apart. He didn't pick a side, which I was shocked by. He was very disciplined in articulating the fear that he had about our future. And so I'll take it a step further. My wife had a friend who, and I'll get to my point, right, because it's about power. In essence, people switching over or turning a blind eye to what might be going on and the authoritarianism and where the country might be going is because they're in power and they can get things done and they feel they're most advantageous is a member of the majority more than in the minority. So, and I'm trying to weave this together because I just think this is a vital aspect. Two friends had a disagreement about what had happened. They disagreed on the language that the individual used and the spirituality of what he professed. And so it divided their friendship. But then they sat down and had coffee. This isn't, I'm not making this up, this was real. And so then they talked about the things that they agreed upon. And then they talked about and showed each other, they switched phones and they looked at each other's algorithms on what they receive as far as information. And both of that compounded what their beliefs were, but in the opposite directions. And so do not think that there's not an industry of algorithms that feed the hate and the division in this country, not only by our enemies, but on purpose, on political views, to make sure that we're divided. And so I don't have an answer to that, but I believe that is a large contributing factor to the division in which we speak of that alienates bipartisanship as a good thing because it separates us so far. And there's a lot of misinformation in those algorithms that are by design to do that. And so your question was specific, and I have not asked anybody to switch parties, but I have been asked if I would ever switch parties. I have. And I consistently answer that my values, as far as the working class, women's reproductive rights, healthcare access, I will not ever turn away from those values. I've lived those for almost 20 years by not words, but deeds. And so that's the reverse of that question.
Oh, okay.
You say you're on the energy committee, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, there's a project for a solar farm in Indiana, one of the biggest ones in the country. It was passed and it was supposed to take effect this year. Trump's trying to stop it. Where are they on that? Has he stopped it? Is it going forward? What?
So it's a little fluid. What I mean by that is, if it is the one in Pulaski County,
I don't know, but I know it's in Indiana and they say it's one of the biggest ones in the country.
so they have pulled tax credits on future projects, but existing projects, there's just an influx of information.
Because that was supposed to start this year.
Right. The carpenters and the electricians, and believe it or not, the operating engineers are all working on those projects.
That's where I got it from, my union's operating engineers, and they said that Trump was trying to stop it and everything.
He's trying to stop
Correct.
it.
And so, what we will do is Renee from my team will get your information and I'll get you a current status of that. Because he absolutely cut the tax credits, but you don't know how far that project is paid for based on, and I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, but the IRA and the funding that the Department of Energy from the last administration was able to get out to fulfill that project. So we have to find out. But the big picture is,
Stand up while he's
All the
talking.
renewable energy.
right, the big picture, which I want everyone to understand is, an operating engineer is concerned about projects that the president is pulling that we fought for to put him to work, and then he stands here and says, I'm for the working people. Or he goes before the union and says, endorse me or help me. I'm one of you. And we're 200 days into his administration, and he's cut funding to your project, to the hydrogen hub, to a lot of different projects that union men and women were providing for their family with.
For clean
And he's
coal.
not on plan.
For
I
clean
didn't
coal,
invite
which
him.
is,
Right. Correct. Yes.
Hi. This is a two-part question. We have been told, or the idea has been floated, that the impacts, the real serious impacts of the big bad bill, I will not call it beautiful, will not actually be felt by us until after the midterms. Is that true?
It's absolutely true.
Okay.
The first sign of it will be October 1st with the Affordable Care Act tax credits, because it's a smaller piece of the pie. It's your entrepreneurs, it's your single parents.
Okay.
It's those that are paying into that system that their prices are going to increase. But what you're also going to see are the private insurers, which I didn't get to talk
Right.
about the ecosystem. Blue Cross Blue Shield and United have said they are going to raise rates
Right.
on private insurance to cover the cost of what, the uncertainty again. So
Okay.
that'll be this year. And the beauty of that, because I asked the question, well, what if we somehow find a way to tamper down the healthcare crisis and find ways to create certainty in being able to pay for that? Those rates are set for a year, and then you get rebated back after
Yeah, we
you
just-
pay them monthly for those increases. So they're gonna keep your money for a year at 20 to 30% more of what you're paying currently. And everyday private payers are going to pay also.
The insurance is gonna go up because people who go to the emergency room and aren't insured, they can pass that on to the insurance companies.
Correct.
Okay, this is in relation to the midterms, okay? So, knowing all of that, if we should be, God help us, so fortunate to take back the House in the midterms, don't know about the Senate, but even if we did, what can you do to keep that from getting worse? How do you address what's already a runaway train if you even have the power to do anything? Because it's law, isn't it?
Yes,
Okay.
you pass a new law, and you use the majority
Okay.
as leverage. No, I'm not trying to be quick or stupid. I'm gonna articulate that. So my why, I can read a poll also. If I get redistricted and the odds are unsurmountable, my why is I know what I'm fighting for. And I'll be in places that no other member of Congress has ever gone. In central Indiana, I'll connect. I was a township trustee for 15 years. I know local government. I know volunteer fire departments. I know, I have networks because I was president of the Township Association, which the majority of them were Republican. So what I mean by that is it is a common interest of rural and urban hospitals are going to be cutting funding. And a third-party validator, our Congressional Budget Office, told us that. That's a third party. Your question is very elementary. Well, what can you do? We have this conditioning that we can't do anything, but we can when we're in the majority. You can subpoena. You can begin pinch points on things that are important to them and start holding funding. And you can and use that as leverage to accomplish your goal when you're in the majority. And so this is a pretest to things that will come down the road with this government shutdown. And the message is clear. They're going to fire employees at the VA. That's their leverage. Right? Fire. And then it'll be the blame game. They're not looking for a solution. They're looking for a thug approach to get what they want. And so when we are in the majority, you have subpoena powers. You have the ability to set the agenda or the goals of the House. And the Senate and the House often negotiate. So what if there's a scenario, we win the majority and the Republicans are in the Senate. In the last 2 years, Senate Republicans in the Senate come to understand that they negotiate. Well, then it gets vetoed. We find a negotiated bill. We'll just use an appropriation bill. The House and the Senate come to a conclusion. We both pass it. The executive branch then vetoes it. Well, then it comes back. And if we have the ability to override that veto, then we get back to some normalcy. I don't have a magic wand to tell you everything is going to be okay. I'm as concerned as you are about our future. But what I can tell you is in my makeup, I can't give up and think in terms of there's nothing we can do. There's a lot we can do. And I say that almost every day. When people come to my office in Washington, D.C., I look them in the eye and I say, I will use the leverage of this office to advocate for what we believe in to achieve the goal. And that is the mission of changing that language. We will use the leverage of the majority of the U.S. House of Representatives to achieve the goals to bring back normalcy, bring back due process, and be able to have a little bit more control about the agenda.
Yeah, and I I was at your town hall in Portage, and you gave me the impression that like Medicare for All was like a non-starter. And you keep talking about status quo and stuff. Is there at least reach for something better than what we got now? Because what we got now isn't really working that well. I don't know if you've dealt with older family members or something, but I tell you, my mom was dying during the COVID thing, and it was a nightmare. So what we got now really isn't working all that well. Can't we at least try for something better?
I did not intend, or my intentions weren't to take away hope that it is the reality, or that it's a done deal or it doesn't exist. The reality currently, when the majority of Republicans are voting to cut Medicare and Medicaid in the House and the Senate, and you have a president that cut Medicare and Medicaid in order to fulfill the tax cuts for the most wealthy, that we can advocate for it. The bill exists, but
Yes, it
it's
does.
currently, under those conditions, is not advancing.
Right.
And as conditions change, which are very fluid, I will always consider that. To the greater point is access to health care and where I stand on that. So you asked me if I have any exposure to parents. Parents are 92 and 91. I'm going to avoid the personal side of that. As a township trustee for 15 years, and I don't want to be dramatic, it wasn't 15 months or 15 days, for 15 years, I was interactive with people who couldn't afford their medication, who couldn't afford their procedures, who I would, I have to be careful, I would create ways to be able to help them so that we would pay for their utility bills, or we would pay for their rent or their food, so that they could pay for a procedure, so that they could get dental work done.
Yeah.
So I want you to clearly understand that I know the plight of navigating through our healthcare system and the expense of it. My daughter, at a very young age, spent 20 days at Northwestern and almost 45 days at the Rehab Institute of Chicago. I know the extent of what medical bills can do to a family. We luckily had insurance, but even with that, it had an impact on it. Yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of give you some information. I had talked to Tom about VA a couple times. My husband went through the VA system and,
So can I just
Sure.
interrupt? An important point of this, Tom is a member of our staff. We have staff members that you should all know, if you want to be ambassadors, that are able to navigate and work on your behalf on federal issues. So if you have an issue with the VA, Tom handles our veteran issues. If you have an issue with immigration, we have someone who handles that. If you have an issue with Social Security, the IRS, you can call our office. If you have a pen, I'll give you our number, and you can tell others who might have that, because we are here on your behalf, and I will go right back to it. It's 219-795-1844. 219-795-1844.
I will say that Tom did get back to my husband like almost every couple weeks. Unfortunately, the VA does not work very fast. My husband was diagnosed in 2007. We just got it like 2019. We had to go hire an attorney. Anyways, I was told as a spouse to be able to go for CHAPA VA. It's an insurance that once your husband's 100%, or your spouse, that you can apply for. December 7th, I put in the app. I just got it yesterday. After so many phone calls there, being cut off, 6 hours sitting on the line, being cut off, calling back, being cut off 3 more hours. I wonder what's going to happen. You know, the 86,000 people they're supposed to be getting rid of, what the vets are going to go through and their wives now. Another thing real quick, Cigna, I just got a notification on, I'm on Medicare. They sold out to another corporation. Their deductible went up to $675 out of pocket. So what these insurance companies are doing, in order to get their money, the deductibles are going up, and that does not go towards that 2,000. So just kind of information-wise.
Multiple levels of things that you touched on. So people ask me what haven't we done through the Inflation Reductionary Act, which still exists, the difference in comparisons of the agendas. Through that bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, we were able for the first time to have negotiate with Big Pharma to be able to bring down the top 20 drugs that are used in Medicaid and to use the leverage of Medicaid to do that. Secondly, we capped insulin at $35. When I first ran in 2019, I remember I was at an establishment in St. John giving a speech. A young man stood up, young child had type 2 diabetes, and it was $475 a month. That legislation capped insulin at $35 a month for anyone who needed, who was on Medicare or Medicaid, insulin. That's a cost savings. The next thing that we did, which she alluded to or referred to, is we capped out-of-pocket costs for seniors on Medicaid at $2,000. That's transformational.
Didn't
That
Trump
existed.
reverse all this?
He hasn't reversed that. That still exists.
Well, I thought the insulin he reversed.
No, he didn't reverse that. Not that I'm aware of. But I can get back to it. Train of thought. Then, that's important for the veterans who are here, for me to reemphasize this. The Honor the Pact Act, which is a bill that I co-sponsored, I was on Veteran Affairs. The Honor the Pact Act is a piece of legislation that if you had exposures to, you get presumptive health care benefits if you had exposures to, I get there, I just had to pause and explain.
That's why they help. Buddies over here pushing us along.
To burn pits, which means if you were in battle, basically in the desert, they would burn their waste. The waste would be toxic. People built, so it's cheaper to burn things than it is to transport it back. And so there's rubber, there's fuel, there's garbage, there's materials that the Army puts in a giant pit and burns. And if you're in a radius, those individuals would get presumptive health care. Where that originated from, we also went back to Agent Orange, because for 4 decades, people who had exposures to Agent Orange had to prove that that's where their blood cancer came from, or had to prove where it came from. This is presumptive. And it goes back into, it's not only burn pits, it's Agent Orange, it's radiation, and it's multiple other levels of healthcare issues that are now covered. So to her point, if a veteran, male or female, goes back and they are at 100% service connected disability, which means you have you are impacted by your service medically, then the spouse is eligible for full health care coverage. So that exists if you run into any veteran, and that was through the Honor the Pact Act that passed through the past administration, went through my committee and passed both houses. So she then went to the next level of cutting federal employees at vital agencies, ultimately what impact that has. So across the country, they've cut federal employees to Social Security offices and to VAs. They have talked about cutting the VA by 86,000 people. You are absolutely correct. There will be longer lines. People will wait for healthcare and access to healthcare. And so, again, the reason why the majority is so vitally important is because we can reverse that. And it won't be instantaneously, because you can't bring 86,000 people back. And when I was on Veteran Affairs, to take it one step farther, they had a difficult time filling the vacancies that they had to be able to hit the capacity or to be able to serve the veteran at the capacity in which the bill said it would do.
I had to go for my military card, where was it, Harvey, Illinois?
Yeah.
But that was the closest place.
The glass is half full. I'm glad, because this is the first time I heard this. I'm glad, well, I'm sorry, well, I'm concerned that it took from December 7th to September 24th or 5th 9 months for you to, 10 months to get that. But I'm glad that I was part of a bill that allowed you to be eligible for that.
Oh, I agree 100%.
But you're looking to protect others.
Yeah, the problem is that I want people to understand too, is that we were going into the government person all the time that was in the government office to help us. Unfortunately, we were told that his mild peripheral disease was not on the list. Put it off, put it off, put it off. Well, then when we went to go claim, they said, oh, you didn't appeal. You didn't appeal. Okay? So we got shortchanged. Okay? Big time. And that's what's so sad, is that you believe in what a person's saying, and then you end up, the attorney told me I should have come to her first after she took her cut.
Yes,
Can I just interject in this conversation, because when these cuts and all these things started, I did a little research, and the VA has doubled, more than doubled the number of patient visits between 2019 and 2024. They doubled the amount of service that they gave to us, and that was where Trump started, that, okay, you doubled the amount of work you're doing, let's cut 80,000 jobs. So that's what we're dealing with. That they're dealing with so much more work, so many more patient visits, and he wants to make the cuts.
Congressman, I had a quick question. Oh, sorry. Oh, Congressman. I'll just say. Oh.
I've had the pleasure to hear you speak 2 times. You need to speak more. From your pictures, you look like a very nice man. When you talk, you are dynamic.
Hey, Congressman.
Our Pete Buttigieg and Gavin Newsom.
So, Congressman, quick question, and I think you've done a great job, and thank you for your leadership for the 1st District. I wanted to ask you, we talked about healthcare, education, quality of life, access to a lot of different things in Northwest Indiana. You've been a great leader in working with the steel community and labor to keep the economy strong. How can we work with you and with other leaders to make sure that this region continues to build on what it has in terms of innovation and clean, green steel production? People are looking for that. We know quality of life is important here, but we also know there's a brain drain taking place. People are leaving because they feel they don't have the economic or educational opportunities. But we have great resources here, multi-generations in business and manufacturing that have made a mark for Northwest Indiana. So my question is, what do you see forming, working with the mayors along the lakeshore, with the mills? As we all know, a lot of change has taken place between East Chicago, Gary, Burns Harbor, and Portage. And how do you think we can convey our views to business leaders to make sure they keep their footprint here in Northwest Indiana?
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your contribution to the steel industry. People don't understand you are a fierce advocate in Washington, D.C. You do a phenomenal job. The steel industry is our economic engine here in Northwest Indiana. Tens of thousands of jobs, either steel workers, contractors, tradesmen, women, and also ancillary mills and factories feed into our steel industry. And it is literally a national security issue. The current state of affairs is that held accountable, now that it is a done deal, held accountable, Nippon Steel is going to, has committed to investing $3 billion. So that's step one, is making sure you hold me accountable, holding them accountable, so that they fulfill all of their promises. And they've made an enormous amount of promises. And so, one in particular was their commitments to the city of Gary, that they would fairly tax their property, which would increase their property value. We want to make sure we hold them to that. And hopefully maybe there be state legislation or something that we can do, or federal, use the leverage of the federal office to make sure they fulfill that obligation, because they made a lot of promises. Secondly, you talked about clean steel, green steel. I touched base a little bit on the carbon capture hydrogen project that would allow the steel mills to use hydrogen with natural gas to reduce their carbon output, which would give us cleaner air and cleaner water in our area. So things like asthma, things like contaminants in the air, it would be reduced. I'm not going to give up on that project. There's a lot of research to be done and to make sure on the tax credit side and BPMO to keep fighting for that, and I will keep advocating for those jobs. To specifically answer your question on what can be done, organize, continue to be involved, hold me accountable, and ask the proper questions and continue to advocate for the steel industry. I'm going to flip and close with the Epstein files. I'm getting a little serious here, and sometimes I talk about it, sometimes I don't. I've had kind of an emotional day, so I'm going to try and get through it. I have to talk to myself for a minute. All right. So first and foremost, no politics should be involved in the Epstein files. So for the last 5 years, and I have to start at, it'll get dark and then it'll get a lot better. So my wife is a survivor, child sexual abuse. Her sister also was a survivor who turned to opiates, left 3 kids behind, and is no longer with us. So we'll start there. For 5 years, who mentioned that Indiana is the second greatest? Here's a little tidbit about that. So IU put out the study 8 years ago that said Indiana was the second in reported cases. I immediately went into action, but if you understand, 80% of the cases go unreported in that world. And I had to learn that. So my wife as a survivor wanted one thing, which most people who go through trauma want, to be able to prevent others to go through what she went through. I met 2 dynamic women through a process who helped me put a program together that was called No More Secrets. Part of that No More Secrets campaign went into the schools with the Department of Justice, with Child Protective Services, and other safety net issues to try and help people children get the help that they need to reduce the long-term effect of the trauma that had happened. No More Secrets also talked about human trafficking, and it talked about the power of predators using leverage and most individuals knowing they're predators. It was educational. It still exists today. That I'm going to cut short. It became law. So we had 83 young people come forward, which I did not expect, while we went to 12,000 students and talked to them K through 12, that were substantiated by Child Protective Services. So we took that data, went to the State House. My father championed a bill that went nowhere because he was in the minority. And I always give credit where credit's due, and this is very difficult for me because he's calling for me to be redistricted. But Mark Messner is a champion, who's a Republican Congress member, but was in the Senate with my father, who picked up the bill, carried it, along with Representative Olthoff out of Crown Point in the House, against all odds. She carried that because they didn't want there was a committee chairman that didn't want to mandate or force schools, an unfunded mandate, to be able to go through these programs. There are nonprofits such as Fairhaven, which is our rape crisis center, that have programming that go into schools to do that. So every so often you'll see in the Hammond Times a headline of a predator getting caught because a child came forward. And that was from the evolution of what went forward, where children feel safe to tell a teacher, because in Indiana it is a law that if you report to an adult, they have 24 hours to report that, and if you don't, you break the law. So we talked about being able to go to a trusted adult to be able to tell your story to get out from that trauma. So again, that's a dark place, right? So when you talk about the Epstein files, to me, it's about survivors. And it's about believing survivors. And when you play games with people who have gone through trauma, it is no longer about politics. It is about making sure we live in a society that absolutely positively protects young people and women and vulnerable, and we do it at any cost.
Congressman, I beg your patience. I feel you've passed over an issue that you should not pass over, and that's genocide in Gaza, which we are paying for, and we need your leadership on that. We need people to speak out against that. The Global Association of Genocide Scholars has condemned it. World human rights organizations around the world are calling for action. The United States is paying tens of billions of dollars to carry out genocide, to fund Israel's campaign of genocide in Gaza, and Israel is annexing the West Bank. We cannot be silent.
May I give a word on that too? There's a recent bill that's been circulating, Block the Bomb Act, H.R. 3565, that was recently introduced in May by Delia Ramirez. She's our neighbor in Illinois 03. The bill is gaining a lot of traction. It's to provide limitations on the transfer of offensive military aid and services to Israel. It has already been co-sponsored now by 51 representatives. It was endorsed by the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Would you consider adding your name to the co-sponsor list?
I'll take a look at all pieces of legislation. I don't know what that one is. Ultimately, what that does is add conditions to the defense of the funding that goes to the defense of Israel. The bottom line is, whatever your title is politically, no one wants to see the destruction of human life. I've communicated that at the town halls. I communicate that now. This week I signed onto a letter the individual mentioned about the West Bank. I don't believe in that. I don't believe that that is a pathway to peace. I don't believe Netanyahu is an answer to a two-state solution, and I know we're getting farther and farther away from that. I know that the ceasefire didn't last very long, and that we need to be able to find, with leadership through America, to be able to find a solution to that very quickly and end the death and destruction. And I also believe that we make sure that we don't forget, and no matter the destruction that has gone on, that there are hostages that need to be returned, and that as a national ally to the United States, that we also take into consideration the people of Israel while we're making those considerations. I'm not saying the government, I'm not saying Netanyahu, I'm just saying those are all the components, and I just signed on to Brad Schneider's letter to the administration about making sure that we do not annex the West Bank, and how that is not a pathway to peace. And so you don't think I'm avoiding it, I will take a look at that bill. Okay?
Please also keep in mind the 4 or 5 U.S. veterans that are currently on their way to Gaza to break the siege, bringing humanitarian aid. These are U.S. veterans who have fought for us. I believe they need to be at least protected. There were drone attacks a couple nights ago, terrorizing them with flashbangs and surveilling them. So, yeah, I think something needs to be said about that as well.
Thank you for putting yourself out there for all of us here and the rest of the Indiana region. Thank you.
Actually, I would like to thank the congressman for the fact that he explained why he voted the way he did on those bills, and and told us how the sausage is made. And so we really appreciate that. We really do.
Thank you.